Hey everyone, welcome to the show. After 11 months of fighting between Israel and Hezbollah, the United States is leading a group of European and Arab nations calling for a 21-day ceasefire.
The proposal comes after an intense bombing campaign by Israel that significantly damaged the Iranian-backed terror group. Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem.
President Joe Biden told reporters the call for a ceasefire is backed by several nations.
We were able to generate significant support from Europe as well as the Arab nations who support this war not wide.
The statement by the U.S., France, and others calls for the implementation of a UN resolution established after the 2006 Lebanon war, but does not mention Hezbollah. The resolution forbids the presence of any militias in southern Lebanon. Some reports indicated Israel accepted the ceasefire, but Prime Minister Netanyahu's office issued a statement and said, "This is an American-French proposal that the Prime Minister has not even responded to." The report about the purported directive to ease up on the fighting in the north is the opposite of the truth. The Prime Minister has directed the IDF to continue fighting with full force. Before leaving for the U.S. to address the UN General Assembly on Friday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu emphasized why Israel is fighting this war.
We're determined to return our residents in the north safely to their homes. We're inflicting blows on Hezbollah that they did not imagine. We do it with power. We do it with ruse. I promise you one thing, we will not rest until they return home.
Since October 8th, Hezbollah has fired more than 9,000 rockets, missiles, drones, and UAVs into Israel.
This is the reality of Hezbollah's threat on Israel. If this was a home, the entire family would have been killed, which is why Israel is at war until these people can come back home. There's no evidence that Hezbollah has been willingly leaving the border with Israel. Hezbollah's entire raison d'etre is to invade and attack Israel.
While diplomats work for a ceasefire, Israel appears on the verge of a ground invasion. The IDF moved more tanks to the border and called up 2 brigades of reservists. IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi told troops they may soon cross into Lebanon.
The goal is very clear, to safely return the residents of the north. To achieve that, we are preparing the process of maneuvering, which means your military boots, your maneuvering boots, will enter enemy territory.
Meanwhile, 2 top Senate Republicans are accusing the Biden administration of holding up weapons and other aid to Israel. A letter from Senator Tom Cotton and Senator Minority Leader Mitch McConnell states, "We write to strongly condemn your administration's continued delay in providing critical military equipment and weapons to our ally Israel in the midst of an existential war." The weapons include Apache attack helicopters and Mk-84 bombs, which can destroy Hezbollah and Hamas assets in deeply buried tunnels. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Thanks so much, Chris. In other news, the Harry S. Truman Carrier Strike Group left the Norfolk Naval Base this week, reportedly headed to the Red Sea to protect against attacks by Iranian-backed Houthi rebels. Wendy Griffith has that story and more from the CBN Newsroom. Wendy.
Thanks, Andrew. The Houthis have attacked more than 70 ships in the past year, creating havoc in global shipping. While the U.S. Navy has been fighting off those attacks, experts say a new strategy is needed to bring lasting security. National Security Correspondent Caitlin Burke reports.
We have certainly degraded their capability. There's no doubt about that. We've degraded their ability. However, have we stopped them? No.
Last month, Vice Admiral George Wyckoff, head of naval efforts in the Middle East, said it's unlikely the Houthis will be swayed by the kind of military response approved by the White House.
But our mission remains to disrupt their ability and try to preserve some semblance of maritime order while we give an opportunity for policy to be developed against the Houthis.
While that discussion goes on, the Iranian proxy group has attacked more than 70 vessels since the war between Israel and Hamas began, claiming to support Palestinians in the Gaza Strip.
What the Houthis, really at the behest of the Iranians, learned long ago is that the shipping that goes through the Red Sea it has a global impact.
The Heritage Foundation's Brent Sadler, a former Pentagon official, predicts this will only continue without a change in U.S. strategy and rules of engagement.
But until you sever their connections to Tehran and at the same time apply more punishing attacks against them, this is going to persist for quite a while, as in fact it has.
Wyckoff says many ships now bypass the Red Sea, taking a route that adds about 11,000 miles to each trip.
Don't get me wrong, it's not an acceptable solution, but we have seen some degree of stabilization where we used to see about 2,000 ships go through the BAM a month. Now we see roughly 1,000 ships.
Meanwhile, Navy forces find themselves under constant enemy fire for the first time since World War II.
Bottom line is that our sailors have been asked to do an extremely difficult job, and they're doing it better than we could possibly even imagine.
Costly U.S. weapon systems are also being targeted. Earlier this month, the Houthis claiming they downed a $30 million drone.
An MQ-9 did crash in the vicinity of Yemen. That is being investigated.
Sadler warns what we're seeing in the Red Sea could also be a sign of what's to come in the Indo-Pacific if the U.S. doesn't change its approach with Beijing. The Taiwanese military already conducting drills in preparation for keeping critical sea lanes open in the event of a Chinese blockade. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Washington.
Thanks, Caitlin. Intelligence officials briefed former President Donald Trump on Iranian threats to assassinate him. Trump's campaign says the briefing covered real and specific threats to kill him and sow chaos in the U.S. There have been 2 attempts on the former president's life in the past 2 months, neither reportedly connected with Iran. However, a Pakistani man alleged to have ties to Iran has been charged with plotting to assassinate political leaders in the U.S. Officials say Trump was one of the targets. Tehran vowed to take revenge after a U.S. strike killed Iranian General Qasem Soleimani in 2020. Well, facing a looming government shutdown, Congress passed a bill last night keeping the doors open for another 3 months. The bill provides funding at current levels until December 20th. That's after the presidential election. It also provides $230 million in emergency funds for the Secret Service. Well, by now, you know Florida is bracing for a massive hurricane headed straight for the Panhandle. Hurricane Helene could be a powerful Category 4 storm with 150-mile-an-hour winds when it hits this evening. As Floridians hunker down, CBN's Operation Blessing is with them, ready to respond once the storm passes. CBN's Brody Carter has the latest.
Forecasters warn the approaching storm could become a devastating Category 4 hurricane with winds up to 130 miles an hour and as much as 2 feet of rain, bringing life-threatening flash floods.
You can hide from the wind, and there will be significant wind on this storm, but you got to run from the water.
20 of Florida's counties are under mandatory evacuations, while the entire state, along with Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina, all under a state of emergency. Meanwhile, cities like Fort Lauderdale are getting ready as families prepare for the worst.
Sandbags to prepare for the storm.
State relief efforts are also in motion with thousands of linemen stationed in Tampa, the Big Bend area, anticipating between 10 and 20 feet of coastal flooding. Forecasters call that an unsurvivable storm surge.
If our community remains central in Helene's path as forecasted, we will see unprecedented damage like nothing we have ever experienced before as a community.
CBN's Operation Blessing is already on the ground, strategically positioned in Panama City Beach, ready to bring aid and comfort to victims of the storm.
Operation Blessing has already been in contact with many of our church partners here in the area. We are ready to respond as soon as the storm hits. We will be coming alongside with not only physical help, but also spiritual care.
OB is loaded with chainsaws, shovels, coolers, and other critical supplies to help Florida recover from the anticipated devastation.
Please join us in prayer for all those that are in the path of the storm, as well as our team.
Helene is expected to make landfall in the eastern part of Florida's Panhandle tonight and swiftly move up into Georgia and other states with heavy wind and rain. Emergency agencies are working across state lines to prep for what could be a widespread multi-state disaster response. Brody Carter, CBN News.
Thanks, Brody. Prayers up for Florida, Andrew. This is a big one.
Yeah, quite a few of us here at CBN have folks we dearly love in the range of that storm in Florida and the states it'll move up to. Wind is one thing, but of course the flooding for this one is supposed to be catastrophic. Here's the good news. CBN's Operation Blessing is poised and ready. Again, as mentioned, they're in Panama City Beach, Florida. We've been there before. We have stationed and positioned ourselves there before. We have multiple contacts with many, many churches in the area. We'll be able to secure volunteers. So we're ready, and we're going to need your help after this storm passes. If you'd like to get on board, give us a call, 1-800-700-7000, or you can go to cbn.com. You can contribute to the Operation Blessing Disaster Relief Fund. We are ready to go. You can text OBDR to 71777, and in the days following, Operation Blessing will be evaluating where we can best help, who we can work with, and we want to make a tremendous difference, as mentioned, with spiritual help and tangible need that we can help.